Dude, never did it.
Welcome back to Never Did It. I'm Brad Garoon. I'm here with my best bud, Jake Ziegler. We talk about movies on this podcast. We talk about 2 movies for every year of the last 100 years. Jake and I recommend one movie that the other hasn't seen. This week, we're tackling the year 1936. Jake recommended to me a movie that I'd never seen, and I recommended to him a movie that I'd also never seen. It's hard to find movies from 1936, but they're both great. Let's talk about the movie that neither of us had seen before, and that's My Man Godfrey, which I recommended to you because I saw that people seemed to like it, and now I know why. It's a delight. It was very easy to find. It's on basically every free streaming service.
Every one of them. Yeah, it's everywhere. Movie is ubiquitous.
What's interesting about it is on some of the services, like if you find it just streaming on YouTube, you can watch the original black and white version, but on most streaming services, it's colorized. And I think you can tell that it's colorized in post because everyone looks a little green.
Right. Yep. I saw the black and white version. So.
Oh, nice. Oh, cool. So I watched the color version. So,
you did? Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So tell me what you thought of My Man Godfrey.
Well, I watched it on Prime. What did you watch it on?
I watched it on Tubi, I think.
Yeah, I'm glad you used the word delight in it because that's exactly how I felt about it. I mean, just right from the very beginning, it's the whole little confrontation they have where he ends up, oh my gosh, he pushed her over into a pile of ash, and it's like the greatest insult anyone's ever had. I mean, I love the whole aesthetic of it. I love the whole vibe of it. I love the whole, like rat-a-tat dialogue thing they have going on there. I mean, William Powell and Carol Lombard are just wonderful. But yeah, I think delight was I think I used that in my Letterboxd review, or maybe I posted on Facebook about it or something, but I'm pretty sure I used that exact same word. Yeah, it was just delightful. It was just a great time. I loved it.
So this was directed by Gregory LaCava, who has directed 51 movies.
51. Yeah, they used to crank them out a lot faster back then.
Well, it's interesting you say that because we did King Kong on this podcast, and right after King Kong came out, because it was such a success, 9 months later they released Son of Kong. I've been watching because Godzilla -1 came out recently and is amazing. I'm really sad you haven't seen that yet.
I know, me too.
I've been reading a lot about old Godzilla movies, and a very similar thing happened there. The original Godzilla came out, was a huge success, and they cranked out Godzilla Raids again immediately. It came out the same year. And then that didn't do so well, so they slowed down a little bit on Godzilla. In fact, Godzilla's 3rd movie ever was Godzilla versus King Kong, or King Kong versus Godzilla.
Oh.
Yeah, and it came out 8 years later. And in between those two, there were a bunch of other monster movies, and these monsters eventually went on to be Godzilla villains.
Right.
Anywho, Gregory LaCava cranked out a ton of movies in his career, and I've seen and heard of really none of them. I had never heard of My Man Godfrey. I'd never heard of Stage Door or The Primrose Path or One Touch of Venus. I've never heard of any of these movies. I'm sure they're all streaming everywhere.
Right. I've definitely heard of My Man Godfrey. I was familiar with the title. I was excited to watch it just because, I'd heard about it. It had some Oscar nominations, which we can mention later. So, I was definitely familiar with that title. But any of those other ones you just mentioned? No, I don't recall any of those other titles.
Yeah, well, so we should talk a little bit about what this movie's about. So My Man Godfrey is about a forgotten man. And these are basically just folks who were affected by the Depression and they're basically in these Hoovervilles because the economy completely collapsed under Herbert Hoover before Roosevelt. He's living by the river in a dump. They've got decent shacks set up. In fact, it's back to Godzilla. The shacks in the Hooverville reminded me a lot of the homes that people built for themselves in Godzilla -1 when they went back to Tokyo after World War II. So yeah, he's in a bad way, although he has a pretty good attitude about it. He and his friends living in this dump are very plucky, very witty guys, very attractive, well put together dudes.
It's a very Hollywood version of being homeless. Let's put it that way.
Absolutely. And he's played by William Powell, which you mentioned, famous as being the Thin Man in the Thin Man series. And while he's just minding his own business, the Bullock family arrives. This is I have to wonder if this really happened, if these giant scavenger hunts really went on in New York at the time, because this is a more depressing version of the rich in New York during the Depression than I've maybe ever seen in a movie.
Yeah, this is brutal. I mean, it's brutal.
Yeah,
you have for a comedy movie. This is really, it's kind of just an awful depiction.
It's a scorching portrayal of the rich.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, of course, this movie's made by all rich people. There are movies now that are so exaggerated, like the rich are eating the poor. You got The Purge and stuff like that. But this is a movie that ostensibly takes place in reality.
Yes.
So this rich family, the Bullocks, they arrive in the dump and they need to find a forgotten man as basically the prize of this scavenger hunt. The biggest thing they could bring in is a forgotten man. And Jake mentioned that Powell throws one of the daughters into an ash pile to intimidate her. And the other daughter, who's a little more flighty and seems a little more naive, she's nicer to him. And he takes, well, it's hard to know based on how the movie goes. He either takes pity on her and decides to be her forgotten man, or he has a plan to use her. And it's hard to know how far back his plan went.
It might be a little bit of both.
Right. Yeah, it probably is a little bit of both. And then you see all of the rich people at the scavenger hunt, and it is just a horde of really out of touch wealthy people bringing in things like goats and live goats and crazy
And
stuff
a baby
like
goat too. Don't forget the baby goat with the mama goat.
the baby goat with the mama. Right. I have a baby goat. A baby goat. Then Irene, who's played by Carol Lombard in a wonderful performance. She's so sweet. She brings in Godfrey, her forgotten man, and wins the scavenger hunt, much to the dismay of her sister and a little bit to the dismay of her insane, hilarious mother, played by Alice Brady in the performance of a lifetime.
Amazing. Absolutely amazing. Yes.
It's incredible. The female leads in this movie are unbelievably funny.
3 perfect performances, all of them.
Gail Patrick plays the sister, Cornelia, who's the villain. If this movie has a villain, she's the villain, but she's not, she's more like conniving than she is bad.
Mm-hmm.
And then Irene wants Godfrey to be her butler. She asks him if he buttles.
If he buttles, that's my favorite thing in the whole movie. Just the discussion of the buttling. Do you buttle? Can you buttle?
Terrific. And Godfrey becomes the family butler. He like a little bit it's like a little bit of Mary Poppins. He's not magic, but he helps them in his own quiet way. But at the same time, he's still, like a man of the 30s who likes to drink and hang out with his friends, and he's kind of a scoundrel. And there's a bunch of, it's a, what do they call it? It's a screwball comedy. So
Screwball, yep.
So screwball antics take place. There's like mistaken identity and misunderstandings and things like that. And it's all very funny. And because I want you to see it, not you, but you, the audience, I'm not going to tell you how it ends. It's fun. But the main thrust of the movie is that Irene is falling in love with Godfrey, and it seems like he doesn't care.
Yeah, that's about right. It's fun to watch how they all 3 of the women really kind of develop different kind of feelings for Godfrey. Uses his his quote magic, like I said, not Mary Poppins magic, but his own brand of Godfrey magic on them. Even when I love even when he becomes the butler and he shaves off his beard and he's got his little butler mustache and everything, and he really plays into the part and everything. It's just William Powell is also great in this. I mean, the women all were great too, but yeah, William Powell is kind of the star that they all kind of the rest of the movie orbits around, and he's great. He's the thin man.
The one thing he does that I didn't quite get if it was intentional or if I was imagining it is he also changes his accent when he's the butler.
Yeah, he does.
He's a little bit British when he's the butler, but then when his friend comes and he's like a little bit exposed, as you find out that he was he was quite rich and then fell on hard times because he had his heart broken, because this is the movie. And that's why he became poor and homeless. So then when he goes to see his friend at a restaurant, he's like, he's a scoundrel again, talking with his mid-Atlantic accent. He's not British anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they met you when you were homeless. You don't have to do this. Anyway, I really like it. In fact, talking about it now, I probably underrated it 3.5 stars, but it's really fun.
I believe I gave it 4.5.
You did, yeah.
I just really enjoy. I love those that whole like genre, that whole era, that type of style. Yeah, I gave it 4.5.
Let's talk about the Oscars, because this is a kind of a peculiar Oscar situation.
Yeah, it is. And I didn't quite know this. You actually busted out that fact to me that I didn't know, but that it had nominations. It didn't win any of these, but yeah, it was nominated. William Powell's up for Best Actor, and Carol Lombard for Actress. Misha Auer was nominated for Supporting Actor, which I think is insane. Then Alice Brady did get nominated for Supporting Actress. And Gregory LaCava for Director, and then the screenplay as well went 0 for 6. And then what's the interesting fact after that?
That never happened again until Silver Linings Playbook came out.
Oh, Silver Linings Playbook. Oh, it lost all same 6 of those.
Yep,
and it lost Best Picture too.
Right. I'm glad that you mentioned that. Misha Auer getting nominated for Best Supporting Actor is insane, because he's basically not in the movie
at all. His part is so nothing at all. Like, that's part you could really have lost that whole, like, it's funny to hear them talk about their proteges, I guess, like, oh, he's my protege and he's my protege, but like, yeah, his part is like nothing. I don't understand that nomination at all.
He's only relevant because he makes Alice Brady's character even more crazy.
That's true.
And he's the reason that Eugene Pallett, who plays the father, who could have been nominated for Best Supporting Actor, because he's actually quite good in the movie.
He's really funny. Yeah.
Yeah.
When he talks like this, and he's a totally different kind of person than everybody else.
What's the one line after when he I mean the day morning after the party, he goes, but when he start riding elephants and and putting them in the library, that's when I draw the line. Something about like riding an elephant into the house or something.
Well, my favorite line that he says, and he says it twice in the movie, is he's like, "What are you doing here?" To Godfrey, he's like, "I'm the butler." I can't remember it exactly. He's like, "And you want to be here? I have to be here. What are you doing here?" Because he hates his family so much. I mean, they are insufferable.
Yeah, yeah. It
But I
says
really
when he's going to jail, he's like, "Oh, I'd finally get some peace."
right.
Doesn't
That's
seem
the
to
second
mind.
time. Then this is after he's thrown Carlo Misha Auer out the window.
That's
God, it's really fun. Yeah, I underrated it. It's very good.
it's a really funny movie.
Speaking of funny movies, you
Indeed.
recommended one of the most famous movies of all time for me, Modern Times. Why'd you do that?
Well, indeed, and like we said already, it's a little bit hard to. I don't have a large selection of movies from 1936 I've seen, but yeah, Modern Times is one of the most famous movies of all time. It's one of Charlie Chaplin's greatest movies. We haven't really touched on one of his movies yet. It's got a that really famous sequence where he goes through the gears. In the machine. I mean, that's super famous. People know what that is, even if they don't. If they couldn't name the movie, they've probably seen that somewhere. I just think it's a really funny movie, and I think it holds up. I think it's interesting to compare, like, because we've already done, Buster Keaton and we've done Harold Lloyd, and I think it'll be kind of, I thought it would be an interesting comparison. I know we've got another Chaplin coming up too, but I love Modern Times.
We have two more coming up because you gave me The Great Dictator and I gave you The Gold Rush.
Oh, fantastic! Have I not
Yeah.
seen The Gold Rush? That's
I
not
don't know,
wrong.
or maybe I'm wrong, but I think that's on there. But it's funny because if we had made our original list a little bit later, there was one morning where I woke up and I just felt like watching a really old Hitchcock movie, and I watched Sabotage, which is fine. Although I'm glad that I gave you My Man Godfrey instead because I hadn't watched Sabotage yet when we made our list. That said, Modern Times, incredible. What I love most about Modern Times, and Gold Rush is the only other Chaplin movie I've seen. Modern Times is the transition for him between making silent films and making talkies. And I think what's so interesting about it is the way you see him sort of finally giving up on silent films. Because this is many years. This is already like several years after the silent film era has ended.
Yeah, I mean, The Jazz Singer was 1927.
Right.
We're in 1936 now. So yeah, they're into it.
By 1930, you're pretty much into firmly into talkie territory.
Yep.
So this movie has some dialogue in it, not a lot, and it has a lot of what feels like on-set sound effects, which his older like The Gold Rush does not have that, and most silent films don't have any sound effects, just music, and this does, and the sound design is really great in this movie. And then what I love most, the big transition. He had said that he would never let the character of the tramp, who is the star of this film and The Gold Rush and many of his movies before this, he would never let him speak. But at the end of this movie, he sings a really funny song while dancing. And that's like the end of the tramp. He did it, and then he never made another movie with this character again. And I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love the movie's great. It's very compelling. It's weirdly pro-communist, and I think that it caught flack for that at the time.
I think you're right. I think that stuck with him for a while after that too. I want to say.
Oh, he was a communist. Oh, you mean the reputation and the
yes,
the difficulty. Yeah, absolutely, it did. But I just think first off, the movie is so well preserved. I mean, it's one of the most celebrated movies of all time. It's not surprising it would be so well preserved. It was interesting watching this back to back with My Man Godfrey because My Man Godfrey is not very well preserved, even though it's colorized. It's not sharp. It's very blurry. You can easily make out what's happening, but it doesn't look like it could have come out today, and Modern Times looks like it could have come out today.
Absolutely. Yeah, all those sequences, like especially when we were just going through the gears or doing those other like the stunts. Yeah, any of those other stunts, everything looks really good. It looks like it could have been filmed, just using black and white today.
And most of that is because it has been so taken care of over the years. It's the story of, I mean, there's not much of a story. It's about a guy who works in this modern industrial age. Yeah, it's difficult, and it's so hard that he would rather be in jail than do work. And it's an indictment of 1930s capitalism. He's on the assembly line early on, and it's difficult, and everyone who works around him is a brute. The company doesn't care about him. They want people to they create a machine that makes you eat while you work, which is a very funny gag. It's a brilliant satire. And then he ends up going to jail because he accidentally winds up in a communist march after he's fired from his job. And then he loves being in jail, and he saves the jail. He stops a jailbreak. And then because of that, they give him time off, and he prefers not, but they make him leave anyway. And then he meets this beautiful homeless girl. And I want to emphasize girl, there is some weird age gap stuff here. You don't get this so much in the beginning of the movie, where you see her siblings get taken back to the orphanage. But at the end of the movie, you find out she has also escaped from an orphanage.
Oh,
And she's his love interest. So that's it.
yeah. That's not great. Paulette Goddard.
That is Paulette Goddard. Yeah. And wow, she looks like she traveled through time to be in this movie from the present, because you texted this to me and I was like, thank God you said that, because all I could think was she looks like a modern, beautiful person.
Yeah.
And nothing like the women of the time. And I wonder if that is because she plays a homeless orphan in this movie. They didn't put makeup on her, so she didn't look made up like the girls of the time did.
Right. Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah. I wonder. That is interesting. That's a good question. Well, there's all those great sequences too when they find that house to live in together, and just the various ways that the house falls apart and all the physical gags that come with that. I mean, there's just so many good, funny little sequences in it. Just like a lot of his movies. I mean, they're so inventive and just so creative. It's again delightful. I mean, both of these movies were just I just smiled through most of them. This was a really fun year to do.
You'll notice when we get to Gold Rush, if you haven't seen it, although it sounds like you may have.
I feel like I did. Maybe it's just not marked on my letterbox or something, but like, hey, let's do it again.
But the scene in the house that you mentioned, he like the Gold Rush, most of the movie takes place in a very similar shack, and he's also dealing with poverty. So he's very, that was a familiar setting to him. What I found so interesting is the sets where there's only a 30-second or less shot are just as well designed as the sets where they spend 15-20 minutes on a longer gag. Like when the homeless girl is jumping from boat to boat stealing food, it's like a full-blown, fully realized set of ships,
Wow.
little boats on the harbor. And I'm like, that's it. It's just for that 15 seconds. That's wild.
Yeah.
This is the other thing that I found interesting. So the soundtrack for the movie includes what's that? Oh, the song "Smile." Just an instrumental of the song "Smile," which I always thought was by Nat King Cole, but Chaplin wrote it, and he wrote it for this movie.
Yep.
Did you know that?
Yeah, I actually knew that, and that's because Michael Jackson had a song called "Smile" that he had used the tune for, that he had recorded for his History album in the mid-90s. So, like, I had kind of known about that.
The only fun fact that I had that you probably don't already have is that Chaplin was inspired to make this movie after talking to Gandhi.
That I did not know.
This whole idea of jail being friendlier than modern society came from a conversation he had with Gandhi, which is pretty wild.
Wow.
So this got no Oscar love, right? This movie was not recognized by Hollywood. Yeah. It just goes to show, man. I mean, between this, that Modern Times was not recognized by the industry at all, and the fact that Alice Brady lost her Best Supporting Actress Oscar to a film, I can't even remember what it was now, but is totally obscure. Like, it has not stood the test of time at all. Shows that there's no predictive capability of the Oscars. They do not know what is going to be culturally relevant down the line.
Nope, it's just a year by year, it's a snapshot of that moment in time, and some of them hold up and some of them don't. I hate to say it is what it is, that's such a dumb expression, but I mean, there's just, it doesn't have to be any more than just that one moment, what happened that night,
Yeah. Okay, so that'll do it for 1936. We'll be back next week with 1968, and because we don't have any 1930s movies to talk about, or 1936 movies to talk about, we can't do it.
Well, I have one other one from this year. If I were ranking them, number one would be Modern Times, number two would be My Man Godfrey, and the only other movie from this year I've seen was this year's Best Picture winner, The Great Ziegfeld, which I have rated at 3 stars. It's fine, but again, it's Best Picture winner. That's like whatever.
Fair enough. Yeah, I guess mine are number one, Modern Times, number two. I think number two is a tie between My Man Godfrey and Alfred Hitchcock's Sabotage. You'll want to see Alfred Hitchcock's Sabotage mostly just because of the scene where there's a scene where a little boy tries to bring some film canisters onto a trolley car, and that shot was reused in Inglourious Bastards to explain how film is flammable.
Yep, I haven't seen Sabotage, but I've seen that shot. I know what you're talking about.
Well, you've seen Inglourious Bastards, so of course you've seen that shot. Yeah.
Yep.
Cool. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week with 1968. If you want to know what is coming out next week, go to our Letterboxd profile. You can find me at Brad Garoon on Letterboxd. I think Jake, you're Jake Ziegler on Letterboxd.
Yep, it's Jake_Ziegler.
And both of us have pinned to our profiles our Never Did It podcast list. You could also just search for the Never Did It podcast list. And the 2 movies that will be discussed on next week's episode are always at the top of that list.
We have a Facebook page now as well. You can check that out at facebook.com/Never Did It podcast. I'll be posting on that with new episodes and just fun updates from time to time about what we're watching and what's coming up.
So check that out. And thank you for joining us for Never Did It.